Today we're going to talk about another emulation project, and this time it concerns the Commodore Amiga. I've got bits of machines lying about which are, parts left over from things I've repaired and put right and saved. And inevitably, whenever you do that, you're going to have bits floating around, and you're going to have basically a parts bin with maybe the odd damaged motherboard in, or the odd case which is kind of past its prime because it's all broken and chipped and battered about, and it doesn't mean you should throw it away. Most of the time this kind of stuff will end up in landfill and so on, which is not brilliant. It's not brilliant for the environment, and it's also not brilliant as far as keeping components that might work or are able to be salvaged and able to use to repair other machines. Sometimes though, things have gone way past that point, such as the motherboard I just showed you. It's nearly every IC on board is dead because of a power supply failure. It's just fried the entire board, and it's well past really you could salvage it if you wanted to, and you wouldn't spend the time desoldering every single IC on the board and replacing them. But there comes a point where you need to salvage the bits that work, and then what happens is you end up with a pile of rubbish, a pile of junk. Now I want to go down the route of not throwing stuff away if possible, if it has a use. I mean, this machine in front of you, which is what we're going to look at today, was built out of a pile of salvaged parts. The case was basically ruined. The motherboard was ruined. The bottom of the case was the bit I showed you, which was broken. Luckily I had another bottom to try and salvage something out of it. And but the keyboard works. The keyboard works, and it still looks like an Amiga, and so I decided to try and put it right. And one of the biggest reasons is because I'd like a set of machines that I already own, but in emulation form as well, so they can just be plugged in, used, played around by the kids or whoever wants to have a go on something retro, and you don't have to worry too much about your 30 to 40-year-old hardware basically going up in smoke because capacitors have blown, or somebody's pushed it off the table by accident and pulled the joystick and it's come off, which does happen. It's probably happened millions of times through the history of these machines. So I thought, why not build some machines that are going to be a bit more future proof, and that's where I'm heading. I'm not intending to use the same type of part all the time, but I managed to get hold of a few boards that are already produced, and I thought, well, why not? They're already done. Why do we need to keep on spending the time on recreating them with Arduinos and so on? So this is the route I've gone down with these, and what I want to do is basically show you how I came to putting this machine together and how it worked out. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this one. It's not massively long, but if you've got a pile of parts and you're thinking about doing something yourself, it might be an interesting thing to look at. Okay, but also there's a part of it before this machine was painted, and there's a bit of a revelation on how you can rescue a half decent case, not one that was in this state which had been glued and stuck on and cracked and so on, but one that's in a decent condition to start off with, but it's just gone yellow. So let's have a look. Okay, so this is the Amiga A500. It's in a bit of a state. It's got glue everywhere. It's kind of yellowed. The case is not very nice at all, and it's not in the best condition really. So if you look at it from here, you can see it's not exactly brilliant. Okay, it's also had a lot of parts taken out of it. You can see the state of it inside. There's no floppy drive. There's cables which are loose where the floppy drive used to be, and if I can move the keyboard down, You can see it's also a reasonably early version as well. So it's probably really good for spares, but not a lot else. It doesn't power on, it doesn't boot up. It's got a few issues. The keyboard itself is a bit yellow, but it actually, I think this one works, and I really don't know what to do with it, because you know, either stick it in a cupboard for spares and forget about it, or do something with it. And I'm going to do something with it, even though it's going to take a little bit of work to bring this case around, where somebody stuck a screw through it and cracked the plastic as well. And it's the usual really brittle case, so I wouldn't really want to retrobrite this as well, because I don't think it would survive very well. It's incredibly brittle. So I'm going to have a think about what I'm going to do with the case. But the idea is to save this machine and do something with it. So I'm going to look into putting modern components in this one and trying to make the case look nice. At the moment, I just want to get a working machine out of a pile of bits. Again, it's, you know, reusing old technology, and I think that's probably a step forward. I have luckily got two other A500s, and they're both in pretty good condition, so this isn't much of a loss by not putting a genuine board inside, you know, by not putting the original floppy drive inside, by not sorting out the keyboard, by not keeping the case original even, because it's too far gone, this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a think about what I'm going to do with it, and we're going to try and make it into a working machine. Now with this Amiga case, one of the first things you notice is how yellow the case is if you compare it to the bottom. But if you do some sanding, you can see the colour coming back. If I zoom out of it, I've sanded this part, and you can see the colour going from patchy to an even colour. So you can actually sand the colour back on these. See, yellow, nice, yellow, yellow, and as I sanded here, it gets more and more of the original colour. But I need to flatten the back anyway, because it's got some damage here which I need to sort out. Somebody's put a screw through the case, and just need to take these stickers off here. But if you're using a nice little sanding block, you can, and I guarantee you'll bring the colour back. So from that to that. So I'm just going to sand a little patch here just to show you, okay? And I'll show you what it's like when it's done. There's a comparison: yellow, yellow, almost the original colour. You see, almost the original colour with a little bit of sanding back to grotty. So there's no reason why you couldn't bring this case back to a nice colour without using any retrobrite whatsoever. So I'm just going to flatten the case back and then see how it comes out. Now after only a few minutes of work, I mean literally, because I'm really going to paint this because I want it to be different because of the plan I have for the case. But if it didn't have this mark on it here where somebody's glued something to it, and it didn't have this screw mark here which I'm going to have to fix, I actually think I would have kept going with the light sanding to bring the original colour back without any sort of chemical use, which is also much better for the environment as well. So it's not a bad way of restoring a case, and most of the dust that come off of the machine was mainly grit and dust and 30 odd years of in-ground muck, and now the case feels quite nice. You can see a huge difference, okay? And even where my shadow is over here, you can see a huge difference with the other side of the case. And you can see there's this part here, which is the bottom of the case, which has been inside, there's not a huge difference. I think, you know, you could definitely bring the colour back by using this method. But anyway, this is not for this machine, but it might be for the next one. But I'm going to try and do something slightly different with this one, because it's not going to be an original machine. Okay, and here's the first couple of coats going on, just to get it back to black. Okay, so before we get a look at the case, all we're left with is the keyboard and the old system board. Everything else is out of the machine. The keyboard is slightly yellow. I mean, it's something I'll deal with in a little while. But for now, we're going to try and get the machine working. And what's mostly going to replace the entire system board are these little components here. We have the Raspberry Pi, and we have the adapter for the keyboard to make it into a USB style keyboard with joystick ports as well, which is quite nice. It's also got an audio out, which is an audio pass through from the Pi, which is quite good because it enables us to pass the sound through as well. And it connects to just a standard header, which is underneath this protective layer here. And it's a very small board, you know, but it's a little larger than the Raspberry Pi you can see here. So we're going to have a look and see how we place it in the case. So the first thing we're going to do is take the case, and we're going to find out where we're going to connect our joystick ports. Now, the original ports were out of the back of the case and just about here. So it would kind of be nice to pop it in the original place, which this one fits really, really well. And that's exactly where we're going to mount this. So we're going to use mounting tape because it's non-destructive, and if I ever want to use this case for something else, I can do. So I've just placed the mounting tape there, and we're going to slide this unit into place. And it fits quite well. And there you go, that's nice and secure. So take the cover off the little header, so expose the pins, and then it's a case of where we're going to mount the Raspberry Pi, because I want access to all of the USB ports on it, so I want access to all of the ports. One of the kind of common sense places would be to fit it along the back here, or even along the side, but to be honest, I think it fits much better either here or here. And again, it seems to be a better fit there. The only thing we're going to have is the cable coming out to this point to join the USB converter up, but to me that's not a problem because then I can use it for other things. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to keep it inside the case, you could mount this inside the case, or have it this way on, so you've got your HDMI, your audio and your PowerPoint on that side out. Now I'm kind of thinking that might be a nicer way of doing it, and I also think that if I wanted to use the USB ports, I could extend it and put a small USB hub here, or something like this, which is just another collection of USB ports. But at the end of the day, I think that would be a neater solution this way around. So I might run with that one. I think I'm going to run with that one. So let's get this mounted up here. But before I do that, I'm just going to image up a SD card to allow this to turn into an Amiga. And what I'm going to try and do is use the Amibian version, which will also allow it to be an A1200, 500, 500 plus, 600 and so on. And that gives us more of a kind of a useful machine than just emulating one. It's still going to be emulating an Amiga, but what it's going to do is allow it to emulate the range of Amigas instead of just a single unit. So I'm just going to take this and put it into the Raspberry Pi before it's mounted. And then this then becomes an integral part of the machine again, just in the same way that a normal Amiga would have been. It would have been just one basic machine with the Amiga OS. So just install the mounting tape, and I'm just going to put this into place. And there we go, we have the two boards mounted now. The next thing is just getting the USB cable and then trying to put the keyboard into place and then seeing what the case actually looks like. The reason I'm using this board is A, because it saves a lot of time and I really want to get this machine up and running rather than it being a pile of scrap parts. It also allows you to connect through the audio across as well, so it's got external audio on this as well. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to connect up the USB cable. We're going to plug it in, get a screen display, and then just go from there and then sort the keyboard out before we do anything else. And actually, while I'm undoing this cable, you might be asking why I'm using a very similar board to the last project. You might also ask, why did I go to the effort of using a Leonardo board on the Commodore 64 or the VIC-20 conversion? And the reason was because I needed to find out if it was feasible to do it that way to start off with, and how effective it would be and how time consuming it would be. And it was very time consuming actually getting a Leonardo board to work as a USB keyboard controller. I mean, it's great, it works, it's cheap and cheerful as well. It's really cheap, but it's a bit on the messy side with all the cabling. And I've kind of done that part of it. And these kits by Timemouth, or Timemouth software, they've spent the time converting what would have been an Arduino style prototype into a single board. And that does save a lot of hassle and a lot of time. And at the end of the day, if there's available kit out there, then support these people who have actually done it already, because you know, it saves you a lot of time and hassle, and it also makes for a nice neat installation as well. And not everybody wants to spend hours mapping keyboards, you know, and it's one of those things. It's whether you want to do that, it's fair enough. If you've got the time to do that, that's also fair enough. But if you haven't, this is an ideal way to go. So, you know, it's supporting people who are producing products for these as well. So the idea is you plug your USB cable into here, and then you plug the other USB cable in to here, and it's nice and tight. I found that with the other ones, a really tight fit, and they give you plenty of cable. This comes with the kit, and it's massive cable, because originally it's designed to turn this into a USB keyboard, and a USB keyboard to plug into a PC and so on. To be honest, it's not really designed as a USB controller for a small Raspberry Pi or something similar inside. It does work, and it's quite neat, but you say you get an excessive amount of cable. But the good thing is, in this case, you can keep the cable nice and tidy and keep it out of the way, and that's not so difficult to do. And you've also got the spare cable if you need it, if you want to run it out to, you know, an external item such as a PC or so on. I've just popped a couple of pieces of tape in here just to keep it tidy and keep it out, falling out of the case and so on. And also it takes a strain off of here if somebody wants to yank the cable, if they do decide to use it as an external keyboard. Now the next job is actually popping on the keyboard. I mean, it's going to use the same mounting points as the original in the front of the case, and then you've got this header here, and it basically plugs into the board like so, and then that's as easy as it gets. And that's really as much as you really need to this kit, and it's quite simple. And then you've got your external audio with this lead here, which is quite a nice lead designed for the job. So I'm just going to power it on without any lid or casing on it, just to see how it goes. So I'm going to pop in a HDMI cable and the power lead and then see what happens. Okay, so I've popped in the power leads. You can see the little red LEDs on here, and on the keyboard, if we have a quick look at the keyboard itself, we've got the red LED. So this was an early keyboard, and I already have an Amiga with the red LED on the keyboard anyway, so you know, that's why I don't want to destroy anything. I don't mind, you know, changing the color of the case, because that can always be reverted back, but I don't want to be drilling holes in casing and, you know, basically messing them up. Okay, so now zooming in on it, you should see the key presses lighting up in green to state that it all appears to be working. Okay, so I've got a Amiga 500 which is running on a modern mouse, and that's the only downside. You can't use the 9-pin DIN joystick ports for the mouse. It doesn't work. It's got to use a USB port, which is why I'm going to probably bring a small hub out, okay, so I can plug this in externally rather than leaving it connected to the case. Okay, so that's basically your Amiga 500 setup. Now, so we're going to put the case on it and see what it looks like. And this is your refurbished Commodore Amiga. And, you know, it looks quite nice in black because it doesn't really show up the slightly faded keys so much. But that's something I have to deal with in a little while. But, you know, it's a nice case. And if you look very closely, you can actually see the pie doing its job in the background, a little red LED through the grills, which actually looks quite nice. I might put some LEDs under there anyway, just to change it up a little bit. But that's your basic Commodore Amiga 500 using a Raspberry Pi, using what were scrap parts, and it looks a whole lot better than it did as a pile of junk. So let's have a listen to some Commodore Amiga demos. You kind of forget how good the A500, A1200, even the 600 was really. And with it based on HDMI hardware now, modern equipment, we can just keep adding and adding to the database of software on this and just point and click, and it's ultimately reliable. And you forget how good the Commodore Amiga was for the time, and it's still graphically very good now. Or let's have a little bit of Quake on the Amiga. So yeah, it runs really well on this. Well, it should do, to be honest, because it's, again, using a pie for doing most of the work. So yeah, it works as you would expect it to work, which is quite good, even with the mouse control on it. Basically saving a A500 from the skip, and you know, it's not perfect by any means, because you know, the emulator takes a little bit of tweaking to get it to run nice, but when it does run, as you can see, it runs really well, and you'd never really know that it wasn't a genuine Amiga. Obviously not a black one anyway, but you know, you can probably see the reasons behind me wanting to paint the case, because I don't want this one to be original in the sense that it's got an original case, an original backplane, original everything, because then I might as well have just used my other machine. The reason I changed the colour is because the case was dire, and at the end of the day I just wanted to protect this case a little bit more, because it is incredibly brittle, and I couldn't really go down the route of any chemical brightening on this or any UV brightening, because it wouldn't last the term. So it's nicely painted, it looks nice, it looks the part, it can be played on, and it's basically saved another machine from the scrap heap, which is what this is all about. Okay, so if you've got one of these and you want to, you know, make it into one of this kind of machine, whether you paint it or not, that's up to you. It's well worth the effort, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. You know, the biggest thing is just sorting out your SD card to go in your Pi and make sure that you have everything on that you want it. At the end of the day, it's a nice little machine, it runs really well, and I'm quite happy with it, and I'm sure that anybody who plays on some of these old games would be quite happy using it. And as I said, it's nice to save something. Okay, so thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to meet you on this channel very shortly. And we've got a lot more content coming, not just emulation, we've got new machines and some unusual machines hopefully coming as well. So you know, we're just going to keep on making these until we've got right through the 8 and the 16 and the 32-bit era, right up to the modern day. That might take a while, so stick around. Okay, thanks a lot, thanks for watching, goodbye.